Before coming to the unforgettable horror stories in the mysterious night of death, remember to subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next videos of the channel, and comment to let us know where you are and what time it is so that God can send good wishes to you and your family members. And if we need to change anything, comment below. Thank you all very much. Story 1. Late at night, when the world felt frozen in stillness, James often found solace walking the sprawling grounds of his rural home. The air was crisp, and the only sounds were his boots crunching the gravel and the occasional rustle of leaves. His companion, Shadow, a loyal black Labrador, padded alongside him. James had lived alone since his daughter, Emily, went missing 5 years ago. His wife, Clara, had left shortly afterward, unable to bear the grief. The farmhouse was too large for one man, but James never brought himself to leave. Emily's room remained untouched, a time capsule of her life before the day she disappeared. One chilly October evening, James decided to cut his walk short. Shadow had been acting oddly, growling low and deep at something in the distance. "What is it, boy?" James muttered, scanning the darkness. The dog's ears were pinned back, and he refused to move. James's flashlight cut through the night, landing on the upstairs window of Emily's room. For a moment, he thought he saw a figure standing there, staring back at him. "Impossible," James whispered. The room had been locked since the day Emily vanished. He hurried back to the house, Shadow barking behind him. Gripping the cold doorknob of Emily's room, James hesitated. Then he flung the door open. The room was empty, untouched. Yet on the bed lay something that hadn't been there before, a small stuffed rabbit. It was Emily's favorite toy, one she'd taken with her everywhere. James's heart pounded. He whispered to himself, "Who's been in here?" The sound of footsteps echoed upstairs. James froze. "Is someone there?" he called out. His voice was steady, but his grip on the flashlight tightened. There was no reply. The following night, James was determined to catch whoever was sneaking into his home. He set up an old tape recorder in Emily's room and locked the door. As the clock struck midnight, Shadow's growling woke him. This time, the sound of footsteps was unmistakable, heavy and deliberate, coming from upstairs. James grabbed his shotgun and crept upstairs. "I know you're in here. Show yourself," he shouted, his voice trembling with anger and fear. He kicked open Emily's door. The room was empty, but the faint sound of a child's laughter echoed in the hallway behind him. James spun around, his flashlight scanning the corridor. "Hello?" James called, his voice cracking. The laughter stopped abruptly. Then a faint whisper came from behind him. "Daddy!" James whipped around, nearly dropping the flashlight. "Who said that?" he demanded, his voice rising. The air grew colder. Shadow whined, pressing against James's leg. "I'm not playing games," James barked. "If you're here, come out now." For a moment, there was silence. Then a voice responded, soft and broken. "Why did you leave me?" James's breath caught. "Emily, is that you?" he whispered. The hallway remained empty, but the whisper came again, this time more insistent. "Why didn't you save me?" The next morning, James played back the recording. At first, there was only silence, then faintly a voice emerged. "Daddy, help me." James dropped the recorder, his hands shaking. It was Emily's voice, clear as day. That night, he called his estranged wife, Clara. "Clara, something's happening here. It's Emily. I swear it's her." "James, you have to let her go." "She's gone," Clara said, her voice brittle. "No, she's not. Someone's been in her room. Someone's trying to tell me something," he argued. "You're scaring me," Clara replied before hanging up. James slammed the phone down. He stared at Shadow, who lay curled up nearby. "Do you hear her too?" he asked softly. Shadow's ears twitched, but the dog remained silent. The final night, Shadow refused to leave James's side, growling at every creak of the house. James sat in the living room, shotgun in hand, staring at the staircase. A sudden crash came from upstairs. He bolted to Emily's room, Shadow barking furiously. The door was ajar. Inside, the room was in disarray. Clothes were scattered, furniture overturned, and on the wall, scrawled in red, were the words, "Why didn't you save me?" James staggered back, his flashlight flickering. A figure stood in the corner, shrouded in shadow. "Emily?" he whispered, tears streaming down his face. The figure moved closer, but as the light hit it, James realized it wasn't Emily. It was a woman he didn't recognize, her face pale and twisted in anguish. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Then she lunged at him. When the police arrived the next morning, they found James unconscious in the hallway, his shotgun by his side. Emily's room was spotless, with no trace of the chaos James had described. The scrawled words on the wall were gone, and the stuffed rabbit was nowhere to be found. Detective Monroe examined the scene, shaking his head. "What do you make of it?" asked one of the officers. Monroe sighed. "I don't know. But whatever happened here, it's not over." In his hospital bed, James stared out the window, whispering to himself, "I should have saved her." Shadow, ever loyal, sat by his side, growling softly at something only he could see. Story 2. It was close to midnight when Mia left her part-time job at the diner. The streets were quiet, the neon lights of closed shops casting a soft glow on the pavement. Her shift had been exhausting, and she longed for the comfort of her small apartment. She slipped into her car, a beat-up sedan she'd had since college, and let out a deep sigh. "Just one more day until the weekend," she muttered, starting the engine. The faint hum of her favorite radio station filled the car as she pulled out of the empty parking lot. Mia always took the same route home, a shortcut through the industrial district. It was faster, though eerily deserted at night. She'd driven it dozens of times without incident, but tonight felt different. As she reached the first intersection, her headlights caught a figure standing on the corner. It was a man, dressed in a gray hoodie and jeans. He raised a hand, signaling her to stop. Mia slowed down, her heart racing. She wasn't in the habit of picking up strangers, but something about the man's posture seemed desperate. Rolling down her window slightly, she asked, "Are you okay?" The man leaned in, his face partially obscured by the hood. "My car broke down," he said, his voice low and hoarse. "Can you give me a ride? Just to the next gas station?" Mia hesitated. The nearest gas station was only a few minutes away, and the man looked harmless enough. Against her better judgment, she unlocked the passenger door. "Okay, but just to the station," she said firmly. The man nodded and climbed in. "Thank you," he said. "I've been out here for hours." The ride started in silence. Mia tried to focus on the road, but her unease grew with every passing second. "So," she began, hoping to break the tension, "where are you coming from?" The man hesitated before answering. "Just passing through," he said vaguely. "Passing through?" she pressed. "At this time of night?" He chuckled, though it sounded forced. "Yeah, bad timing, huh?" Mia noticed he was fidgeting, his hands clenching and unclenching in his lap. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. "What's your name?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Evan," he said quickly. "Well, Evan," Mia said, her voice firmer now. "Where exactly did your car break down?" "I didn't see any vehicles back there." Evan shifted in his seat, avoiding her gaze. "It's a bit off the main road. You probably missed it." "Off the main road," she repeated, skepticism creeping into her voice. "You mean in the industrial district? There's nothing out there but warehouses." "Yeah," he muttered. "Just lost, I guess." Mia's eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The deserted road stretched behind them, illuminated only by the faint glow of her taillights. Something wasn't adding up. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked. "No," Evan admitted. "Just passing through." "Passing through where?" She pushed, her nerves fraying. "This isn't exactly a tourist spot." Evan sighed heavily, leaning back in his seat. "Why so many questions?" he asked, his tone sharp now. Mia's pulse quickened. "Just making conversation," she said, forcing a smile. "It's not every day I pick up a stranger." "Maybe you shouldn't," Evan replied, his voice low and unsettling. Mia's grip tightened on the wheel. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Evan turned to look at her, his face partially lit by the dashboard lights. "You seem like the cautious type," he said, his lips curving into a faint smile. "I'm surprised you stopped." Mia forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow. "Yeah, well, you looked like you needed help." "I did," Evan said, his tone softening. Then after a pause, he added, "Or maybe I just wanted someone to talk to." The comment sent a chill down her spine. She swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. "Well, you'll be at the gas station soon," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Will I?" Evan murmured, almost to himself. Mia's stomach dropped. She glanced at the clock on the dashboard. They should have reached the gas station by now. The realization made her stomach churn. She knew this route like the back of her hand, yet the station wasn't there. The buildings outside looked unfamiliar, their shapes distorted in the dim light. "What's going on?" Mia muttered, more to herself than to Evan. "You took a wrong turn," Evan said, his tone unnervingly calm. "No, I didn't," Mia snapped. Her hands began to shake. "I know this road." Evan didn't reply. He was staring out the window, his expression unreadable. Panic setting in, Mia pulled the car over to the side of the road. "This is where you get out," she said, her voice trembling. Evan turned to her slowly. "You're scared," he said, almost as if observing her reaction. "Get out," she repeated louder this time. "Fine," Evan said, raising his hands in mock surrender. He opened the door and stepped out. But before he closed it, he leaned in and said, "You should be careful who you let into your car." Mia slammed the door shut and sped off, her heart pounding. She didn't look back until she was sure she was far enough away. When she finally glanced in the rearview mirror, the road behind her was empty. When Mia reached home, she locked every door and window, her mind racing. Who was that man? How had she gotten lost on a route she'd driven so many times before? Exhaustion finally overtook her, and she fell into a restless sleep. The next morning, she couldn't shake the events of the night before. On her way to work, she decided to avoid the industrial district entirely. But as she passed the gas station she had meant to take Evan to, something caught her eye. Police cars were parked outside, their lights flashing. A small crowd had gathered, and yellow tape cordoned off an area near the pumps. Mia pulled over and approached one of the officers. "What happened?" she asked. The officer glanced at her, his face grim. "A body was found here early this morning. Looks like foul play." Mia's blood ran cold. "Who?" she stammered. "We don't know yet," the officer replied. "No ID. Just a man in a gray hoodie." Mia felt the ground sway beneath her. She stumbled back to her car, her mind reeling. Was it Evan? If so, how had he ended up here after she dropped him off miles away? And if it wasn't him, who was he? The questions haunted her, and as the days passed, they only grew. The police never identified the body, and Evan was never seen again. But every now and then, as Mia drove home late at night, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her from the shadows. Story 3. It started as a joke. "You ever been to that old playground by Elm Street?" David asked, leaning back in his chair at the cafe. "The one they shut down years ago?" Lauren replied, her brow furrowing. "Yeah, I heard about it. Creepy place." "They say it's haunted," chimed in Kevin, smirking as he stirred his coffee. "Kids used to play there, but something happened, and now no one goes near it." "What happened?" Lauren asked, her curiosity piqued. Kevin shrugged. "Depends who you ask. Some say a kid went missing. Others say the equipment just started falling apart, like overnight. My dad says it's cursed." David grinned. "Let's check it out tonight. What's the worst that could happen?" Lauren hesitated but finally agreed. "Fine, but if this turns into one of your stupid pranks, I'm leaving." The three of them arrived at the playground just after midnight. The streetlights in the area were dim, casting long shadows over the rusted swings and broken slides. The air was heavy, and a faint metallic smell lingered, making Lauren's stomach churn. "This place is worse than I imagined," she muttered, shivering as a gust of wind rattled the old chain-link fence surrounding the park. "Relax," David said, flashing her a reassuring smile. "It's just a bunch of rusty metal. Nothing scary about that." "Then why does it feel like someone's watching us?" Lauren whispered, her eyes darting to the shadows. Kevin pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight. "Let's split up and explore. We'll meet back here in 10 minutes. "Are you serious?" Lauren snapped. "That's how people die in horror movies." "It'll be fine," David assured her. "Just look around. Take some pictures. We'll be right back." Reluctantly, Lauren nodded. She stayed close to the swings while Kevin wandered toward the old slide, and David moved toward the jungle gym. Minutes passed and the playground seemed unnaturally silent. Lauren's footsteps echoed as she approached the merry-go-round. She ran her fingers over the chipped paint and frowned. "Why does it feel warm?" she murmured. Suddenly, a child's laughter rang out, faint but unmistakable. Lauren froze. "Kevin, David, stop messing with me!" she shouted. Spinning around, there was no reply. Meanwhile, Kevin's flashlight flickered as he approached the slide. He crouched down, aiming the beam inside. The tunnel was empty, but something glinted at the far end. Crawling closer, he reached out and pulled out a small, rusted toy car. "What the hell?" he muttered. He turned it over in his hands, noticing initials carved into the metal. Tiss suddenly. David's voice broke the silence, calling from the jungle gym. "Kevin, over here!" Kevin pocketed the toy and jogged over, finding David standing at the base of the structure, his face pale. "What is it?" Kevin asked. David pointed. "There's something in there." Kevin shined his flashlight, revealing a small, dark figure crouched inside. It looked like a child, its back turned to them. "Hey," David called out. "What are you doing here?" The figure didn't move. "We should go," Kevin said, his voice trembling. Before they could leave, Lauren appeared, her face pale. "Did you hear that laugh?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yeah," David said, pointing toward the jungle gym. "There's someone here." "What?" Lauren whispered. Stepping closer, she peered into the shadows, her heart pounding. The figure shifted slightly and they all froze. "Let's just leave," Kevin said again, backing away. Lauren turned to him, her voice rising in panic. "Why did we even come here? This isn't funny anymore." David tried to stay calm. "Just don't make any sudden movements. We'll walk back to the car together." Kevin shook his head. "I'm not staying here another second," he snapped. "Whatever that is, it's not normal." "You think I don't know that?" Lauren hissed. "But running isn't going to help. What if it follows us?" As they argued, the figure moved again, this time standing up. It was impossibly tall, its limbs too long, its movements jerky and unnatural. The sight silenced them all. "Run!" David screamed, grabbing Lauren's arm. They didn't stop running until they reached the car. Panting, Lauren fumbled with the keys, finally unlocking the doors. As they sped away, no one spoke. When they were safely back at Kevin's apartment, he pulled the toy car from his pocket and placed it on the table. "I found this by the slide," he said, his voice shaky. David stared at it. "Those initials, TS, do they mean anything?" Lauren's face went pale. "There was a kid who went missing years ago. His name was Tommy Sanders. My mom used to tell me about it." The room fell silent. The next morning, news broke of a body found at the playground. The victim's identity was unknown, but authorities confirmed it was an adult male. The cause of death was listed as undetermined. Kevin, David, and Lauren couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the corner of their vision, felt like a reminder of that night. They stopped speaking about the playground altogether. But sometimes, late at night, Kevin would wake up to the faint sound of laughter, soft, eerie, and impossibly close.